We are here. Communism is here right now, trying to take hold in the form of our government, who is in now a bunch of different things. The government said nothing about educating your kids or providing you health care. It said all men were created equal. They were not guaranteed equal outcomes in life. And people keep messing this up of just going, all people are created. You can't do that. And that was not the intention. And that's why it's not working. They can't even do the few things they're responsible. They're responsible for securing the border. But instead, they want to dabble in healthcare. They want to dabble in childcare. You know, childcare is infrastructure. Like hell it is. Okay. Infrastructure is infrastructure. A border wall is infrastructure. So that's where we have to get them back of just going until you've seen that perspective, you've seen people who've lost their freedom, you would do anything to prevent that. You only get to vote for communism one time.
Hello, Culminators. I would like to introduce you today, to those of you who don't know her, to Raven Harrison, who was kind enough to host me. I guess she did host me, yes, on her relatively new podcast. I guess it was a couple months ago. Raven ran as a Republican candidate for Congress in Texas. She is a very interesting lady. She's got a lot to say, and I thought it'd be a good idea for her to say some of it here. So I have invited her. She has graciously accepted. Now I've reciprocated. And I am sure that she is going to have something special that you hadn't thought of, because her background is not your background. If you're watching this, I know who you are. You're not Raven Harrison. Raven, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Ron. Great to be here.
How are you today? What's it like in Texas?
Oh, it's a great day to be a Texan. It's awesome. We have beautiful weather. We have cattle and ranchers, and
oil.
Texas tea.
Texas tea, right. You know, was it fifth district?
26th district.
26. Where'd the 5 come from? I don't know. 26th Congressional. How the hell many seats does Texas have anyway?
Oh, quite a bit. Texas is a big state. It takes 2 days to drive across it, and probably 2 days to negotiate anything in Congress because of it. But
I bet.
But yes, the 26th Congressional District.
You're a lifer?
Yes.
As Army brats go, you couldn't really be a true. Did you spend your entire childhood in Texas? No, impossible.
No, I didn't. I was an Air Force brat, but both my parents are retired Air Force lieutenant colonels, and I'm married to a retired Air Force Major C-17 pilot.
So you're Air Force people, big time.
Yes,
big time.
Solidly Air Force.
That's why you like the big sky country so much, I guess.
Aim high.
So, all right. So your district, I assume that your district is where you live.
Yes.
One cannot always assume that. I'm speaking to you in Newark, New Jersey, which famously had a mayor who didn't live in the city, who is now a member of Congress.
Yes, they do that a lot. We have a lot of them that don't represent the districts that they live in, Nancy Pelosi being the most notable example.
She's notable for so many reasons, but we don't want to get depressed too fast, too early on in this, even though we're going to be talking about immigration, which is by far one of the most depressing issues in American political life in my entire lifetime. All right, so what part of Texas is your territory?
So my territory is just
Raven country. That's what we're going to say.
Texas country. So yes, we are just north of Dallas, Fort Worth. So an hour east of Fort Worth and about 20 minutes north of Dallas. I live in a city called Frisco, Texas, and that is where the Dallas Cowboys have their the Star practice facility, which is bigger than some cities in and of themselves.
So I'm hearing then, as you describe it, a little bit of a pinkish tinge, which over what's mostly probably a blue territory, which is why you're not in Congress now.
Well, it is, but we had remember we had the census came out, so we had the redistricting that happened last year was the epitome of gerrymandering and political theater. So our lines were redrawn that took out the strongest section. We had Tarrant County, which some people may or may not know has been a hotbed. It was a strong Republican, solid district. It was taken out of District 26, and instead it put in two rural districts, and Denton County, which is probably where all the Californiaites and New York ones that are flooding in, the triple maskers are going there. And so that's what we had an uphill battle to deal with. But it wasn't just the Democrats. You know, I didn't have the most trouble. I didn't get to that point from the primaries. That came from the people inside our own party.
I believe it. It's a well-known story. It's a well-known story, especially in those borderline areas. You know, it's even where I live in New Jersey, the member of Congress in the district where I grew up after. But let me ask you something. If you lived in one place till you were 9 years old, and then you lived until you were 18 in another place, where did you grow up? The first place or the second place?
The second place.
The second place. Okay, so
I didn't grow that much before I was 9, so
well, you don't
I
consider
would say
that to
most
be
of my
formative.
growing took place above 9.
For me, so in my case, I grew up in Brooklyn. I would say I grew up in Brooklyn, but obviously I didn't, because under your standard, when we were 9, we moved to New Jersey. To the rest of the country, what's the difference between New York and New Jersey? What are you even concerned with? Why am I saying this? Because where I actually did grow up under the Harris test, there's a congressman named Chris Smith who has been in Congress since I was in college.
Wow.
Okay, this is when the college had just started. They just started having college. Okay, and this guy he's been a rhino from day one. But it's exactly that's where these guys hang on, and they hang in forever.
Yes.
All right. So that's the story. That's the election story. You might get back to that. I want to first learn a little bit more about you, because we didn't get the chance to really get to know each other when you had me on. We just dove into these really controversial issues. But I kind of rebranded this podcast in the second year of it, because I felt that I wasn't getting the opportunity to talk about the people themselves,
Yes.
as opposed to what they have to say about rather standard issues that everybody has actually rather standard opinions about.
Right.
Tell us how you got to where you are now.
Well, the shortened story was like I had said, I am a daughter of 2 Air Force colonels. We moved a lot. I was born in Texas, but both my parents were officers, so we had competing priorities and degrees. Both had top level security clearance in the Pentagon. We can get to that later. But
You're allowed to even tell me that?
I'm allowed to even tell you that. Now, I can tell you that in all my years, I have never come across any accidental classified documents in the trash,
Not
under
even
my
next to the
bicycle.
Corvette?
Never. But it was a
And I think
vintage
that's
Corvette.
considered
It
a
was
very
a
safe
vintage
place.
Corvette. So, and the doors on it were locked, even though the convertible was up. So it was, but yes, it was. So it was an interesting childhood. But we lived in Germany, some of the most dangerous communist countries, being dragged all over the place, places that were very hostile to Americans. And, you know, my mom had another layer, being a Native American Indian. She was, you know, there were people who refused to salute her. My dad being white.
Really?
Oh, yeah, we had
Really?
people that, and I noticed that as a child, going, Mom, aren't they supposed to salute you? Because in military ranks, the one who is of lesser ranks initiates the salute. And there are just people who would not. And she rose to lieutenant colonel, and it was not an easy ride. So when I have people telling me, you know, oh, well, racism is this, and I was like, you want to tell me how to be a minority? I got this. Go sit down. This is my territory. But we did it. But they never complained. They really had a sense of pride. It was bigger than, you know, she said, what I'm fighting for, Mom, why do they do that? What I'm fighting for is bigger than that.
But this is remarkable, because nonetheless, in the 70s and 80s, or
yes,
80s and 90s, your
70s
mother,
and 80s.
70s and 80s, your mother was, as a Native American, able to reach the rank of lieutenant colonel in the
Correct.
United States Air Force, even though I have been told by reliable sources that this is the most racist, apartheid, nasty, hopeless.
Country in the, yeah, that it's just right up there, one step from hell. I've heard that
I
too.
don't understand
But
it.
you
I don't
know,
understand it.
the interesting thing is also she got a degree in electrical engineering, electrical electronics engineering from University of Houston. They refused to grade her papers. The dean had to grade her papers. She was the only woman of color in that program in the late 60s, and they didn't want to grade her papers. And this is in the heart of Texas, but yet
Right.
she's
This is
done all this.
Texas. That's Texas in the '60s, which
Yes,
was really a southern state
yes.
for all
And I
practical
was
purposes.
born there. And so when I hear people, but my mom, unlike a lot of these ones you hear, did not spend her time lamenting of all the things that were wrong. She still put her life on the line for this country that didn't always treat her very well. And she doesn't, so she instilled in me the survivor mentality, not the victim mentality. And that's the important thing is it's what you know, choose to focus on. Is the glass half empty? Is it half full? Or if you're a leftist, it's the water's racist. So
Well, this sounds a lot like Alan West's personal story.
but I guess they're both of the military cloth, but we moved around a lot. And then I basically I skipped 2 grades. I was a bookworm and geek extraordinaire.
Well,
And
your
I went
mother was an
to,
electrical engineer.
so we're academics in this house, and I went to college. I left for college at 16. So I desperately spent the first few years of my college career hiding my age.
Jeremy keeps getting me guests that are smarter than I am. And this is just ridiculous. I'm supposed to be like this towering intellect. And, when am I going to get to lord it over somebody? All right, fine. This won't be that one.
Well, you did
16.
16, and I hit that. I celebrated my 18th birthday 3 years in a row. I never told anybody how old I was, but then I went off to college and I started in the global agencies, Ogilvy and Mather and McCann Erickson, doing accounts like IBM and Shell Oil. And
Were you working business side or creative side?
I worked on the creative and the business side. So I didn't do the graphic design, but I was the account supervisor. I used to place the media buys and those sort of things.
Okay, okay. This is great. This is good because you, you can't get this stuff from your campaigns, all your web. This is much more interesting because I know I know your position is that I'm a conservative. We're in favor of
Yes.
borders, yeah. But how do you go from a military family and hard science? What was your dad's field, by the way? I say was. I'm sure he's doing fine.
He flew in Vietnam. He was a pilot initially, and then he ended up, he was a lawyer. So then he ended with military intelligence and with a law degree.
Okay, so these are some hard ass parents, and
Yes.
then you say, well, based on what I grew up with, I want to go into advertising. What the
I
hell's
double
that?
majored in advertising and law. I couldn't decide. I was addicted to commercials and CSI and forensics. So I could not decide.
You should have become a trademark lawyer.
And ultimately, my student loans decided that when I got out of college, I didn't have a chance to be picky. I was like, I have to get a job. I have to start paying these back. I didn't know that somebody was going to be paying off my student loans, and passing it on to the whole world. But I got a job and paid it
Me
off.
neither.
And
I'm just foolish enough to
ultimately,
go ahead and pay them.
well, I mean, I never looked back. I loved the creative flow to it, but I never wanted to join the military. I never saw that any kind of political. It was never in my wheelhouse. What put it in my wheelhouse was, my husband's a pilot. He needs to be near the airport so he doesn't have to commute and he can be home for our family. And our 8-year-old daughter was expelled from, they tried to expel her from elementary school for voting for President Trump in a mock election they had without telling us. They called us and told her to come pick her up from school, that there's been an incident. And I said, excuse me. And we went running only to find out. We got there. My husband and I stood there and I said, why? My daughter's hysterically crying. I said, why does she look like this? And she said, well, we thought you would want to know that we had an election today. I said, you're studying civics? And she goes, no, But
No, God,
your daughter.
no, God forbid.
No,
That's
I mean, I was like, make it make sense. Why is this happening? And she said, oh yeah, but your daughter voted for Trump. And we're both looking at her like, okay. And she said, I said, she's 8. She can't vote for anybody. And she said, oh, she's making those decisions now. Where will she be when she's an adult? I said, are you out of your effing mind? I said, and that's what
name the school
started
district. Name the school district.
Huntington Beach, California. So I told
We're looking at you, Huntington Beach, California.
Huntington Beach, California, and I have never seen anything like that. And then that's when we got a full dose after we pulled her out and immediately put her in homeschool. Hey, patients, where did this book come from? I've never seen this. This is a stay at school book. I said, what is a stay at school book? We're not allowed to take those home to the parents. And I went, oh my. So the short story is I looked at Paul and I said, this is bigger. Something is really not right here with what's going on with our kids. And I'm telling you, that day, Ron, the conservative warrior was born. They're like, what makes a conservative warrior? Having them come after our most vulnerable makes a conservative warrior. So I immediately jumped in the field. I said, Paul, we have got to get the heck out of California. And we have to go home. I have to go by where they're carrying guns, where they're free, and we have Whataburger right now. So we moved back and I ran for Congress and we weren't successful, but any door that God opens, no man can close. And now I've gotten a chance to meet you. I'm getting a chance to, now I'm just not Texas's warrior. I'm everybody's conservative warrior. And we're out there fighting the fight that needs to be fought. And I was hand raised by warriors.
So is your daughter now in a public school?
She is homeschooled. We tried once again to put her in school in Texas, thinking I'll put her in a Christian school. I'll watch them like a hawk the first few months, only for her to come back 3 months in and say, Mommy, I'm the only one that's not vaccinated in my classroom. I said, how could you possibly know that? And she said, because they asked us. And I said, excuse me? I just needed my daughter to tell me that she had had her HIPAA rights violated at a Christian university. And sure enough, when I showed up the next day as angry mama bear, and I said, excuse me, my daughter said this, and I quote, Ron, you're going to love this. So I go to the administrators and I said, my daughter's under the impression that you were playing COVID vaccine videos and telling them. They kicked her out of class. They said that once she revealed that she had not taken it, it made the other students uncomfortable and she was asked to leave. And they never called and told me. And I said, how does that happen? And she said, Jesus would want you to take the vaccine. I said, I beg your pardon. And she said, Jesus would be a fan of anything that protected his flock. And I said, Jesus put his hands on lepers. And I immediately said, we're going to be going ahead and pulling her out. And they actually had the police come and take the books we were taking out of a 6th grade's locker and remove them from us rather than let us see them and take them home when we elected to take her out of school. That's what's going on. So I want to tell your listeners, it's not my school. Yes, it is. They have declared war on our children. So that's what got me into the fight.
Very, very important there. Because I was going to make a general point, but there's a more specific point. My general point is a lot of people think that private schools are immune, whether they're religious or non-denominational, are immune from what's going on in education today. They're not.
No,
they're not. And in fact, the more elite the school, the more likely. But even if a school is affiliated with a religious denomination, a lot of those denominations have become completely woke themselves.
They're letting in the woke for the dollars. But who was it? Was it Jesse James that said, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is.
Right. That's
where they are. People, it doesn't matter whether it's private. They want the children, Ron. So they're infiltrating all the ranks because they know that we don't want this indoctrination and that we're putting our kids there. So they are following suit and they are infiltrating the private and Christian and Jewish schools.
Well, they really are. And in fact, this goes back to a topic you and I discussed briefly on your podcast, anti-Semitism. Yes. There's been this incredible increase in media attacks, particularly from the New York Times, on the Hasidic community in New York City.
Yes.
And how they run their schools. Why? What's all of a sudden the issue? There have been Hasidic schools in New York, in number for generations now. What's going on now? What changed? several things. One is that as a model of schools that produce citizens that tend not to commit violent crime and tend to get married and stay married and not have children out of wedlock and not be drug addicts, that is a damning indictment of the New York City public school system. But also, these are schools that have resisted the wokeness that they're trying to push. And that's part of what's going on also is that they've passed this in New York, this massive, set of regulations that is meant to give government bureaucrats the ability to go into private religious schools and not just tell them you're not teaching chemistry properly,
Right.
but you're not teaching biology properly. What biology? The kind of biology that a justice of the Supreme Court doesn't know well enough to decide whether or not she's a woman. Okay. It's really everything.
No, it is. And it's the fundamental. I always have to simplify this for the people I talk to, because that's where the creative helps. So let me tell people, this is how you digest it. There is no money in normal traditional families and in normalcy. The money is in all these other factions, all these other, look at it from a medical standpoint. There's no money in health. All the money is in supplements, pills, chemo treatments, doctor's appointments, shots, treatments. That's there. They make more money off of you when you're constantly anxious, when you're constantly ill, when you have all these ailments, when you're running to the doctor. They don't make money off of healthy, well-adjusted, two-parent family people who don't need lots of therapy puppies. So they make their money off of people who constantly need something to fix it. God is free, and that's a problem for a lot of people.
Do you think the fact that you came from a household with military parents gave you the ability to have this sort of this framework where you understand morality, not even necessarily morality, responsibility and accountability in a way that I think so many other Americans don't seem to be able to get?
It is. There's two layers and it's nice that you're actually asking this, because I don't get to go into kind of details, but two things that I would like to say. One is, at being Native American, a lot of people don't know that. Some just assume that I'm African American. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I'd like to tell people is I don't get to decide what days I want to deal with racism. I don't get to decide when this is a fight I want to have. This is something I've had to deal with my whole life. So I can either let myself be crippled by it, I can use it as a crutch for everything I can't do, or I can just accept everybody has something they have to deal with, and this is just something I have to deal with. And sometimes it's good. Some days I'm like, and we move on. The other thing is you can't fix.
I just want to stick a pin in that for a second, because this goes back to your lesson from your mother.
Yes.
Which is that, yes, there are problems. Yes, there are people who are treating me without respect or even insubordinate under the rules. But guess what? I'm not going to be diverted from what I want to achieve.
Correct.
And from the loyalty that, all things being considered, I have for the country that has given me this opportunity. Now, I've got a laundry list of problems that have to be solved, but that doesn't mean I'm throwing everything out the window. That was your first point. Your second point?
Second point is you can't fix what you don't acknowledge. A lot of times people don't want to see the problem. They just want to talk around it, talk at it. I can't believe how many people talk to me about racism. They don't ever ask me what my perspective is. They tell me, well, you should feel like this. This is what we should be doing about racism. How would you honestly know? But what I can tell you is, with the military parents, my parents were never home. They were gone 325 years, my last year before I went to high school. I mean, I got used to get little Post-it notes. We didn't have smartphones, and every little Post-it notes, pay this bill, put this in the mail, we love you, and things like that. And I never saw them. I can count the number of birthdays I had my parents on one hand, and I'm a grown adult. And you don't get to complain. I remember you asking, going, why is this happening? But we lived in Germany when the Berlin Wall was up. I saw someone murdered trying to get to freedom. We used to go to the store. There was nothing in the shelves. We had empty supply chains. We had no gas. We had places my mom couldn't drive in the Middle East because they didn't respect women and she could be arrested. I mean, there are so many things that people talk about here that they've never, until you've lived it, until your refrigerator is empty and you can't go because of a bomb threat, because I mean, until you have lived it, you don't know. And now that's why when I saw it coming here, we are here. Communism is here right now, trying to take hold in the form of our government, who is in now a bunch of different things. The government said nothing about educating your kids or providing you health care. It said all men were created equal. They were not guaranteed equal outcomes in life. And people keep messing this up of just going, all people are created. You can't do that. And that was not the intention. And that's why it's not working. They can't even do the few things they're responsible. They're responsible for securing the border. But instead, they want to dabble in healthcare. They want to dabble in childcare. You know, childcare is infrastructure. Like hell it is. Okay. Infrastructure is infrastructure. A border wall is infrastructure. So that's where we have to get them back of just going, until you've seen that perspective, you've seen people who've lost their freedom, you would do anything to prevent that. You only get to vote for communism one time.
So, as you said that, I thought a very clever segue, and then it doubled back on me. So you'll help me out here. I said, oh, yes, of course. And you saw someone dying,
yes,
in an attempt to cross the Berlin Wall.
Yes.
In other words, in an attempt to achieve freedom.
Yes.
Illegally, under the law of the country they were coming from.
Correct.
By crossing a border without permission. Now, what I was going to say was, by virtue of being in this military context, you understand, obviously, that borders are the sine qua non of the existence of nation states.
Yes.
On the other hand, we also see that they can be obviously obstacles to achieving freedom. So how do you respond to someone who says that the people, and I think I know the answer, the people who are coming over the border are just trying to achieve freedom, just like that person you saw giving up his or her life in Berlin when you were growing up?
No, the difference is the person I saw in Berlin had nothing. He was not given an option. And the second thing is they were unarmed. The answer is, what can the government do once they take their guns? The answer is anything they want. And that was the answer. These ones who are coming across the border, how do you justify starting your life, illegally? So you want to start your American dream by crossing into the country illegally and then coming in to be afforded the services and the resources that are paid for, okay, by your fellow Americans. And many of these people, because I was just at the border, are not coming in waving the American flag, desperate to learn English, desperate to assimilate to our countries. They come in waving the Honduras flag, the Venezuelan flag. They come in waving countries that they say they're fleeing because of oppression. They also know the cartels run those. We heard a horrific story last night from one of our border agents about an 11-year-old girl who was raped and left in the desert. She had 22 samples inside of her, and samples only last 24 hours. So you're telling me that your quest for freedom would allow you to put your child in this kind of peril, knowing that the border to our legal border, the ports of entry, are not in the river, but right. The ports of entry do not have cartel members in them. So if you were going to embassies and legal ports of entry, you would not be exposing your family to this kind of danger. And I don't feel anything that they are fleeing. That kind of energy should be put into making your country better.
Ports of entry, right? Ports of entry is a term of art. It is a phrase that comes out of the statute that defines the conditions under which a person seeking legal
asylum,
legal asylum based on political.
There it is, not economic.
not economic, because guess what? Everyone in South America would be entitled to asylum,
Exactly.
except for the cartel members themselves, and very, 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 very thin slices of the governments that run these countries.
Well, I don't know because they're emptying their prisons. They actually said in Venezuela they are emptying their prisons and allowing them so that way they don't have to feed and house their criminals.
Sure.
They are
Well, that's
sending them to the border,
entirely rational. It's
and
entirely
then they
rational.
just grab a kid somewhere, rape a kid here and there, and all of them come with bracelets showing how much they are indebted to the cartels for. So they all start their American dream, their economic asylum, with debt to drug dealers and sex traffickers. And then they come into our country wanting to be welcomed with open arms, taking taxpayer resources and saying, we just want a better life. So is the translation, you just want a better life at the expense of, the citizens you are sponging off of? This is the land of the free, not the land of the freeloaders.
So, Raven, these people are doing this, and most of them are probably, listen, as you point out, to put your own child at risk, is something that we can't even conceive of. But for most of them, there are all these pictures that we've seen of busloads and busloads of men in their 20s, not,
Yes,
people
fighting
who are
age men.
eminently, they are capable of taking care of themselves. It's rational for them to try to get in on the goodies. What the irrationality is, the policy that's in place in this country.
Correct, because they're incentivized to not follow the law. You don't get the free cell phones, the health care, and all of those as an American citizen. They wouldn't qualify. So they make no effort to become citizens because they get more being illegal.
So I'm going to ask a really kind of, such an obvious question, but you've spent so much time thinking about this issue. What is it? What's the incentive of the Democratic Party and a very large percentage of the Republican Party to encourage these preposterous policies? Is it just we're bringing in future Democratic voters? Is it that simple?
No, it's not. So for the Republicans and the milquetoast soft who have also not solved this problem, they like the cheap labor. They like to exploit these people, knowing how desperately they want to come here and do that. So I feel like on the Republican side is an attempt to exploit cheap labor. And when you have elitists who have these jets and everything, they need people to run this operation. On the other side, the Democrats, I feel it's a little bit more nefarious. They are looking not only for future votes, because I can guarantee you, okay, that if these people that were sneaking in voted Republican, you'd be able to see that wall from space. Okay, so it's part of it is just the votes. The other part of it is they need an underclass. They need someone who needs them desperately and wants that welfare state, someone who wants to be kept and who is okay with that's not the American dream, to work hard and get something. It was not a handout, and that's what they love to get. So they've been entitling these people and making them feel like they are owed something by their very existence. So that's what they're training future loafers who are not contributing, but will vote and keep the power coming, and occasionally cheap lasers. So it's votes and exploiting an underclass, which keeps shifting. First, it was Black people. Then it was, the illegals coming through. And then it's back to Black lives. So they're constantly looking for an underclass that they can exploit and say, we are your saviors. Let us create some problems so we can solve them. And P.S. Trump is horrible.
Why have Black voters tolerated this? There's because the majority, the typical Black voter, the not middle class and below. Actually, I suppose the higher economic and social class a Black is, probably the more likely is to be a Democratic voter. But these guys are squeezed. They are by far the ones who lose out the most from this policy.
Yes, they are not. I don't like to use I use the term historically illiterate, because I'm of Native American descent. So I've got a whole nother layer of that people don't realize, but a lot of people can't have the discussion. When I say this to people, I get anger and angst, but at least I'm coming to from a point that their ears are open. A lot of them don't know what Juneteenth really is. That's the day that we had to come down and let you know that you were free. And they celebrate that as some kind of holiday for the Democrats. They vote for them because they don't realize the effort that has been put through by the Democrats to destroy the Black community. Margaret Sanger actually said that that was the goal of Planned Parenthood, but yet who's their biggest consumer? And you know, the Democrats and what people don't realize is, why are most of the northern states blue if it was the South that separated? It's because they couldn't run their own fields. And when the slaves, I mean, they fought against, how many Democrats voted for Black people to be free or for women to have the right to vote? So the problem is you don't, that was the Great Reset, is when all of a sudden they started flooding up to the north and posturing themselves as the, you know, as the saviors. When I tell people, let me just tell you this one statistic. When I talk to people of color, and I'm willing to have that diet, let's talk. I'm not angry when I talk to them. Let's have a discussion, because this, how can you, Raven, how can you support this? How can I? Let's talk about that, shall we? Okay, who was in power when they stole the land from my ancestors? You want reparations? So you want the land that was stolen from my ancestors to pay you for something you never experienced? So let's really talk about that. But I said, how many Union soldiers? So you know that Civil War, most of them know that Civil War erupted over slavery. How many Union soldiers died fighting for slaves they never owned? 100,000 Union soldiers lost their life to defend freedom that they never took from anybody. And yet you, 265 years later, are voting for the party that enslaved them. That one statistic, when I say to people, a lot of times you should see the gasp, because they honestly don't know. They're not teaching this in schools anymore. They have eliminated civics. They've eliminated history. Now we've got all social justice. You know, it's okay to tear down Lincoln's statue. He's the one who freed the slaves, but you're defacing Lincoln's statue. Okay, but you've got one of George Floyd, who was arrested for pointing a gun at the belly of a pregnant woman and was high on coke or something, fentanyl. I don't understand, but when you look at the machine that is putting that forward and all the history is gone, now we understand that those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it.
So what can we do now that we have failed to put you in Congress? So
now she's loose in the nation, guys.
That's right. In fact, God has saved you from going to Washington and being rendered utterly useless.
Bump.
What's your plan? What's your plan?
My plan is, I had to really take a page out of the Bible, and because I'm a doer, we're warriors. I'm like, okay, where's the fight? We're going. But you know, God has a passage in there, and be still and know that I am God. And you know, to kind of let him light it a step at a time. So what I've noticed is, now that I don't have the title, you know, of Congress, now I'm free to fight the full conservative CRT, all the things. And so what my plan for the short term is, I am now, that's how my social media came up with the conservative warrior, but now it kind of fits because I have been everywhere. I've been in North Carolina helping them, Salt and Light for Religious Freedoms. I've been with Moms with Liberty, trying to fight against this indoctrination, because they can't say it, I can say it. You know, I can walk in, they can call me whatever, you're a white supremacist, you know, that's queen supremacist to you, get it right. So we get on them, so because I can say that and I can take it. Now I realize that must have been in the plan for God of being able to, and my goal is, we won't know that we won't make it. I would love to have a debate about oppression of minority women on the House floor of the highest government in the land with AOC. Let's do it. Let's talk about oppression in the Capitol between you and me. Okay, so we will do that, but it just comes from right now. I don't think people are asleep, Ron. I think they're afraid. And now we have to let them know that we have to report to this line. Faith without works is dead. So what we have to do is we have to start mobilizing this thing and putting God back. We can't just sit back and go, wow, they're cheating. Okay, report to this line. It's time to don't just vote, take 20 people with you. What is your congressman right now, viewers? What is he voting for right now? Do you know? If you don't, you should be on the phone right now going, if you even think about this, we're going to be out at your picketing your office. That's how it happens. That's how you get it. What little change we got on the speaker's floor came from 20 people who were threatened and abused for trying to stand up, but to get that gavel out of her vodka-soaked fingernails and, and get it back to that's what and people are like, oh my God, why don't we just vote for the speaker? Why are they, you asked them to stand up. We told them to get a backbone. We told them to push back. We told them to stop being the uniparty. That's what we need to start seeing. It works. It works.
I think you've really nailed it. Not being afraid, and listen, you're fortunate if you have faith in God, because you know that you can't come to any harm that God doesn't want you to come to, and that you can also never be worse off by doing the right thing.
He's already won the victory.
But some people, let's say they don't have, some people call it a gift of faith, or they don't want to make the investment in developing faith. I'm not a theologian, but either way, the fear thing, people have to be prepared to stand up and be counted. And I sometimes, during heated moments, for example, as maybe by the time this drops, it'll be decided. My partner Harmeet Dillon is running to become the
yes, she is
chairman of the Republican National Committee.
Yes,
and certain people on the right have, especially before she announced and she was associated with the RNC, and people would say, would call her a rhino, and she and almost always these people were anonymous.
Always.
And I would say, I know what Harmeet is doing, and I know she's put her career and her name and her reputation where her mouth is. You're a dog on Twitter, or a flower, or a cartoon character. Okay, you got no skin in the game. Oh well, listen, if I put my real name down, I might risk my job. Yes, you might.
Yes.
But if you don't risk it, you risk everything. And,
what's the safest place in a hurricane? I always tell people, a ship in the harbor is safe, but that's not what ships were made for.
Right. Very good. On that, believe it or not, time has flown. I want to thank you very much for joining us. Let's make sure that people understand, if they want to learn more about you and what you're doing, where to go, and we'll flash it up on the screen. Jeremy, let's not forget account or website, or what are we focusing on now for the?
So if they're wanting to reach me, you can reach me at ravenharrison.com. That's our website. Ravens Radar has the podcast. We have a Facebook page for Ravens Radar. We have
very big
Conservative
Facebook,
Warrior.
Because that's really your main.
Facebook is our main one, just because there was so much, Twittergate and everything going on, but now that's being resolved. But Facebook, Raven the Conservative Warrior, dropping me a message on there is the best way to get a hold of us. And then and then they can always find us. And we've got the book coming out, Raven's Mantle. That'll be available on ravenharrison.com, where we're going to outline these stories. Parents in the Pentagon for 9/11, Vegas massacre.
There's a book coming out. You'll be doing a book tour, so that's going to be the New York event.
You got that right.
Okay, we'll talk about making sure that you get the right place and the right people there.
That sounds fantastic.
Raven, thanks so much for coming on the show, and we'll talk again soon.
Honored to be here. Thank you so much, Ron.
So long.